So now there's going to come a time when you're trying to compare fractions, and the fraction is where, ooh, like, man, I can't draw a picture of 15ths, or I can't draw a picture of 19ths, and so we have to learn how to compare fractions without pictures. In other words, we're going to be trying to explain the big X and why the big X works when you're trying to compare fractions. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at something called the least common multiple, and that is the smallest number that is divisible by two numbers. And let me put this part in here. This is two different numbers. That needs to go right up in there. Or we're going to be looking at something that is pretty much similar to that, which is called the lowest common denominator, which is the smallest multiple of two different numbers. Now, both of these are the same, is that both of these are exactly the same thing, except that we're going to use this more when we're talking about fraction, because we're trying to find a common denominator or a common multiple. Now, let's look at an example, and let's go through and explain the big X and why it works. So we're looking at 1/3 compared to 2/4. Now, like I told you, we're not going to draw any pictures, but what we're going to do is I'm going to work it out using the big X right here on the side. 1/3, 2/4. Now, you know that when we're using the big X, we always make a big X. We circle the denominator and the numerator of opposite fractions. We're going to do the same thing here. And then we multiply across. This is 4 times 1 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. So, you know that 2/4 is greater than 1/3. But now, why does that work? Well, it works because what we did is we found the lowest common denominator, or the least common multiple, of both of those fractions by skipping two big steps. And let's go through, I'm going to go through and explain those two steps. So we have 1/3, and we have 2/4. Now, what we're looking at right now, guys, is we're looking at the denominators, because we want to find a number that is common to both 3 and 4. So we're going to list the multiples of 3 and 4. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I can keep going on and on and on. Then for 4, we're going to have 4, 8, 12, 16. Like I said, I can continue going on and on. But now, what I found was the number that was common to both 3 and 4 was 12. And it's also the smallest number that is common to both 3 and 4. Remember, that's the key. The smallest number that is common to both of those numbers. Because as you can see, that 4, 8, none of those are common to 3. And 3, 6, and 9, none of those are common to 4. But 12 is common to both of them, and it's the first one. It's the first one. It's the smallest one that is common to both. So the question is, well, if we have 1/3 and we have 2/4, and we're trying to compare them, then, well, what can we do? We want both of these to have a common denominator of 12. Well, what can we do to 2/4 to make it have a denominator of 12? And what can we do to 1/3 to make it have a denominator of 12? Well, I know that 3 times 4 is 12. And you remember, whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do it to the numerator. So we multiplied the top and the bottom by 3. Because remember, if you do it to the denominator, you have to do it to the numerator. Remember, because we want those fractions to represent the same thing. And the only way to do that is multiplying the numerator and the denominator. Got me using the wrong vocabulary. So then, in order to make 1/3 have a denominator of 12, you have to multiply it by 4. So 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Remember, we're still trying to compare. 2 times 3 is 6. And 4 times 3 is 12. Well, when we look at that and now we have something that's common, we can really compare. Well, 4 is less than 6. So that means that when we look back at our original fraction right here, that yes, it is true that 2/4 is greater than 1/3. And you remember why? Because we switch color, that 2/4 takes up more space. And we always have to circle that because remember, we have to explain why is it greater or why is it less than. And so here are some example problems for you to work out. And that is the end of our lesson on comparing fractions without pictures.